Today's guest is someone who knows the power of asking the right questions and the impact they can have on the trajectory of our lives. As a successful business owner, leadership coach, and workshop presenter, he's spent years helping others navigate their fears, reimagine what's possible, and take steps towards their biggest goals. Outside of his professional life, he's a devoted husband and proud father of 5. Together with his wife, he homeschools their children, fostering creativity, curiosity, and a love of learning. Over the years, he's honed his skills in public speaking, storytelling, and inspiring others to embrace their own potential. Brett is here to challenge the way you think, inspire you to dream bigger, and show you how a simple shift in mindset can create a ripple effect in your life. Ladies and gentlemen, Brett Klooz. Brett, I would love for you to take us back to the beginning. So how did you start in the restaurant business, and what made you decide to move into consulting? Okay,
2 completely different subjects. When I was younger, there's a lot of push to go to college. There's like this drive. I tell this story sometimes. It's like, I remember when I was young, spring break, we went to see the Eiffel Tower. And when you go to the Eiffel Tower, it's completely packed. People in France are a little less, well, they're not scared to touch. And so they're pushing you into the elevator. It's just push. And I felt the same way in high school, this drive to, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? And I really had no idea. So I kind of followed the path, which was to go to college. I went to college for music education, and I was there, and the entire time thinking, I want to be wealthy. I want to have money when I grow up. And the two just weren't jiving. You know how much a teacher makes. I knew how much a teacher made and the hours that put in, especially for music education. And so I started to evaluate what I was gonna do. I was working as a manager of a restaurant, part-time as I was in college, and they were offering opportunities for purchase, like sweat equity ideas and things like that. So I decided I was gonna change my major from music to business and learn business to potentially manage. I went to an open house at the business school. They talked about owning a business and the values of it, and I told him the potential opportunity I had if I went with this restaurant. He told me to my face it was better to take the opportunity than to finish school. The professor told me that. It's really weird, but he said, yeah, if you actually, because I don't think he thought it was real. He didn't think I could actually go and own a restaurant just by working at it. So that in itself was special. So I did. I actually dropped out of college, went and managed my restaurant, built up sweat equity, saved up my money, and bought my first one.
Wow.
Not because I love restaurants. That came later, but really because I wanted to own a business, and that was my in.
Right. And moving into consulting.
Right, so moving in consulting was now I had this business, and I wanted to do well. And I found out that the best people that I had were the ones that set goals. And I also set goals. And so what I started doing was I started coaching my team. I wanted to grow. And so I found out that if the people that had very little ambition, which were high school and college kids, they came in with, not negatively, they just had never thought about their futures. And so if I started planting seeds of future growth, whatever it was, they did better at work. And I realized that I could coach people into success just by planting the right seeds that made them want to do more. And it started with my staff. From my staff, I built, at one point I had over 100 employees. 50 of them were in some form of leadership, meeting regularly to talk about goal setting and or leadership, how to lead, how to teach, how to train, how to grow, before I sold the businesses. And I sold them specifically to move into the world of coaching, to have a bigger impact than what I had.
Gotcha. So when you were working with these college students, was there a defining moment when you realized the importance of goal setting?
Defining moment, there is a defining moment. I don't know if it matches exactly that, but I had started, this is my early years, and I had taken like some life coaching courses, and I was sitting down, I had like 3 or 4 leaders at the time, and I was meeting with them one-on-one to talk about goals. I had a meeting with one individual specifically that sticks out to me, and when I asked them what they wanted in their future, like around the age of 40, what he gave me is what I now define a trajectory goal. I realized that people weren't imagining futures. They were just figuring out what was likely to happen. And I really, because this is how I was raised, create whatever you want and go for it. Be an astronaut, try to be an astronaut. But a lot of people were never inspired to have that. And when he said that, it made me kind of think, who else out there could benefit from thinking bigger than picket fence, Ford Taurus kind of mindset? Like, there's nothing wrong with anything. It's just that, are you choosing it because you want it, or are you choosing it because that's what you think you're going to do?
Right. And that speaks to a lot of people that I know personally who were brought up, they weren't taught goal setting at all. I was never taught anything regarding goal setting growing up. And I made sure to change that with my daughter, to tell her, hey, let's talk about what you want to do in the future. Let's talk about what you want to plan for. And that set her on a completely different path than she was currently on, of just taking a moment and thinking about what could the future look like.
Absolutely.
And that made a really big difference for her. What's one of the biggest challenges that you faced early in your career?
The biggest challenge I ever faced was I had planned to have multiple restaurants, but I got one, and I was doing really well. I had a top store in the company. I had a great team. I had a new baby and another one on the way. And I got a phone call from the CEO that said, hey, you want to buy a second one? It was 15 minutes down the road. It seemed like a good idea. And so I had 1 week to decide and 3 weeks to go through the purchase. So now I have a newborn and a 2-year-old and a brand new store. And I had never ran two. So I was not a business owner at the time. I owned, but I was not an owner in my mindset. I was managing a business as the owner. And when I had two, I realized that there was no way possible to do everything in both locations. And it was a steep learning curve where I was working every day. My wife was having to come in. She's got the babies as well. So you're trying to feed and find sitters for babies. And it was incredibly challenging. And the success of the first store immediately started washing away because I wasn't there to keep it up. And the store that I had bought was very low, which is why they were trying to sell it. And so basically I went from making pretty good money to no money at all, thinking, oh my goodness, not only did I make a bad choice, but now I've screwed over my other choice, and it was tough.
So did goal setting help you in getting over that challenge?
It's a good question, yes. I realized that what I was doing wasn't working, and I had to do something different, and I had to figure out what different was. And when it comes to goal setting, and what I hope we talk about later today, is just like, what does that look like? I had to create a path forward that was different than where I was, and it had to be big enough for me to want to do it and to stay in the fight. So I actually did create the goal to have 4 stores over the next 10 years. And I created not just the goal, but I created a lot of steps that went along with it, how I was going to structure my management, what everything was going to look like, where they were going to be. So I created this entire game plan knowing that I was failing. So I had something to shoot for, a direction to go in.
Right.
And I wouldn't have gotten out of where I was if I know a lot of people in my situation, me included, would have just said, I quit, this is too hard. But if you start looking at a bigger picture of what's possible and not what's likely, because what's likely is I was going to go bankrupt. What's possible is, well, what if I turn these around and become a huge success? And that is the defining moment that changed everything.
I've heard you speak about SMART goals and how you're not really directly a fan of SMART goals. Tell me your philosophy around SMART goals and your alternative.
Yes. And to be clear, I'm not entirely against SMART goals. The process is great. People are taught it because it helps. But I have a different view. Speaking specifically of SMART, I have a problem with the A. So I love specific, I love measurable, I love relatable, and time-bound. Like, those are decent. But achievable is in the eye of the beholder. So I get really turned off when somebody comes in and says, choose an achievable goal, because now all of a sudden we get back to that trajectory concept that I've talked about, which is, why did you choose that? Like, I want to have $100,000. Why not $1 million? Oh, that's not achievable. Well, if you think you can, you think you can't, you're right. So as we got into SMART, I found a lot of people limiting their beliefs based on the SMART method, just because of that A stuck in there.
Wow. Okay. So a lot of people, like me, myself, I will set a goal and then I will struggle to reach that goal. What can people do? What strategies do you use to stay on track to meet the goals that you set?
So I think we need to back up. I think we really need to understand the nuances of the way we say goal. And I think there's multiple ways to say it, and I think there's multiple meanings. A goal is a to-do list. For me, when I see people saying goal, I see a to-do list. I see them throw a dart right in the middle of where I see goals, and they say, I'm going to accomplish this task. Well, why do we struggle? Because it's not tied to anything bigger. So when you shoot for a goal, the goal needs to have meaning to you, far greater than the actual purpose behind that goal. So when you say it, are you saying, like, what is it tied to? Let's say I want to lose 20 pounds. We've got a specific measure. I want to lose it in 2 months or 3 months, right? So I'm going to lose 20 pounds in 3 months, and that's achievable, and I want to do it. But why do you want to lose 20 pounds? If you don't have that why that says I want to be healthy, or that why because I have a wedding, those are the most successful weight loss stories, they have a bigger why tied to the what. And then you have to start kind of going down the journey. Well, why do you want to be healthy? Well, because my kids and I want to travel. Okay, why do you want to travel? Dean Graziosi has a great part in his book where he talks about 7 levels deep. And he talks about deepening the depth of your goal to really understand the meanings behind it. So when it comes to why can I not achieve a goal, it's because that goal was pulled out of nowhere, something that you want to achieve like a to-do list, but not something that's tied to who you are as a person and who you want to be. And so when I have people, like in coaching, that's very important, is that we start looking at goals is why do you want that goal, and go deeper and deeper so that we can tie it to something that's going to make it very achievable, make you want to do it.
Do you have any advice for people who struggle to find their why? They look at those questions and the 7 levels of why, and they lose it after 2 or 3, and they can't find what their real drive is. Do you have any advice for finding that?
I strongly recommend talking to people about it, having a coach or having a spouse or having a friend that you're constantly communicating with to help voice it. In your head is not big enough space to hold all that you want. And honestly, that's a big problem for a lot of people. They just haven't really thought. You haven't spent enough time thinking about, what do I want my life to be? Instead, we think, what do I want to accomplish? So having the capacity to think about it on your own or with somebody else, start setting a plan backwards. So that's where goals come. You set this bigger goal, you start working the steps back to achieve that. If you're only 2 levels deep, you're 2 levels deep. Start building a plan backwards on goals that you can accomplish, habits that you can instill to get to where you are now. Understanding that as you move towards that why can move a lot. And so you're constantly, as you're going, saying, oh, well, now that I see the world differently, now that I've stepped into thinking more about what I want, I realize that I took 2 steps this way and I want something different. And so being open to moving directions following that why, but continuing asking why. Are the goals in alignment with your true why? If you don't have a true why, start working on something and reevaluate what is the why behind that goal.
So a lot of people would struggle with, at that point, sunk costs. I've already started down this path. I'm already 2 years into getting my degree. What advice would you say to someone who's struggling to decide whether it's time for them to pivot or whether they should keep going? They're not sure, they're stuck in that spot. How do you know when to pivot? So
kind of the same thing. It's not easy because when you have sunk costs, now all of a sudden you have a goal to not waste the money. You kind of have this part of you that doesn't want to go where they need to go. But if you're truly going deeper in your why, that's the 100% key. Who are you trying to be based on what you're doing? And how can you get there through what you're doing? Or how do you have to pivot out of it? If you don't have somewhere else to go, there's no reason to pivot because you have nothing to pivot to. If you're conflicted by this thing that you want to do, that is your new why, and you're held back by the old why, then you need to evaluate the costs and the value. Because in your question with education, I have seen people that leave a degree 6 classes left, and then you're kind of saying there's no reason you couldn't have finished the school even if you knew that's not where you wanted to be. In the sense of a degree, will that degree help you somewhere else? And chances are yes, if you've already kind of come closer to it. So there have been a lot of times in my case that I've done things that are absolutely 100% unnecessary for what I want to be, but they weren't unnecessary when I started. But the journey of accomplishing them helped me along the way.
Gotcha.
I don't know if that answers it or not.
Yeah. So you work with businesses, mostly restaurants, to help them grow and scale up. How does goal setting play into helping those managers and those owners?
We'll start with owners. When I started coaching, the first thing that I started seeing was a lack of direction. So as a coach, the first thing I have to do is help them establish their vision, their goals. And so I had a framework that was inside out. You need to look inside and figure out how you want to get your business to do, and then we'll grow from the inside out. So it starts with imagine. We struggle as people, we struggle with the trajectory goals and thinking of what's likely instead of really first imagining what we want. If it was possible, if there was a magic wand and it made it happen, what would you do? And that often changes people's perspective on how they plan to forward their business. So first we imagine, then we take out the fact that there's probably a good reason they didn't think of that the first time, some kind of negative belief of why you can't, I'm too old or I'm too young or I don't have enough money or people, whatever. So then we have to tackle why they don't think it's possible. And then we set goals. Now that we have the new vision, we start basically putting the stones across the river, building that path to get there. So for owners, it's about having a vision in the first place where they want to go. When it comes to how the owners or the leaders relate downwind to their team, a lot of problems with business comes from micromanagement. The vision of the owner or the leader or the manager isn't made clear, and so every decision is confusing. And the best way to lead a team is to create a larger vision, which is, it's a goal, but my goals are vision-based. We're looking at that big picture direction we're gonna go. And then I let the team create the steps and the goals to get there, not me. So I create, as the leader or as the owner, the big picture of where they wanna be, and then I ask them, how would you get there? Understanding that they have a lot more ideas on how than I do.
How do you feel about taking care of the micromanager? Is it specifically communication from the manager of their vision to those that they are leading that cause the micromanagement? Is it a miscommunication that causes micromanagement?
There's a lot of things that cause micromanagement. Not having a vision will create the need for micromanagement. And sometimes a leader may have evolved from having the vision, so now they have it, but they didn't lose the habit of micromanagement. And coaching helps in micromanagement because a lot of times the person doing it doesn't realize they're doing it. They just want everything to be okay. But again, that comes back to your vision. Do you want to be the one doing everything or not? That's part of the goal setting. That's part of the big plan. Do you want your company to scale beyond you or not? For example, I had 2 stores. I couldn't do everything, and I realized that my ability to control the situation was gone. My acceptance of that is what allowed me to grow. The thing holding people back is their acceptance. You can't do it, and you'll never do it as long as you try to do it. So kind of establishing, again, that's coaching is incredibly helpful. If you have the right coach, they can help you see and they can help walk through some of the things because every case is a little different and each situation is different.
On that note, if somebody is stuck with an owner or a manager over them that is micromanaging, is there a nice way to suggest to them that maybe coaching might help, or maybe they should look into how to not micromanage? Is there a pleasant way to say that?
There are. That's not something I've had to deal a lot with in what I do. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I'm not saying there's not a lot of it out there. It just hasn't been my direction. I'm usually going top down instead of midline up. There are absolutely ways, some of which are actually to coach a little yourself. So as a coach, you're asking powerful, open-ended questions. So as a person being asked or told what to do, sometimes clearly defining a powerful question that says, what's the bigger picture here and how do I fit in it, can help the leader see a different viewpoint than just being told what to do all the time.
Gotcha. You've talked a lot about getting out of a small mindset and looking at basically big, hairy, audacious goals.
Yes.
Have you ever set a goal that you felt like was achievable? You don't like that particular portion of it, but something that you set a really big goal and then thought, oh my gosh, I have bitten off more than I can chew, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get there. Have you ever put yourself in that situation?
So set the goal, yes. Thought I couldn't do it, medium. So I decided that I wanted to have $1 million by 40. That was a goal. Mm-hmm. And at the time, that seemed very unlikely, and that was my big, hairy, audacious goal. Mm-hmm. 3/4 of the way to it, I thought to myself, why didn't I make the number bigger? So if you're not setting the goal, you're not even coming close. That's the first part. But you asked a really good question earlier, and this aligns with it. What if you've sunk costs? Mm-hmm. As I moved towards the goal of $1 million, specific and measurable and attainable by the age I'm 40, that didn't stay my goal. I realized that there was more to my goal. Not that the $1 million wasn't a great point, mm-hmm. but I didn't say $1 million or more, which is something you should say in goal setting. But I also didn't understand the true why. So financial freedom is different than $1 million. Mm-hmm. Understanding how I can use my money. Why do I want $1 million? Well, I want more family time. Mm. I was running restaurants. And what would I do with the $1 million spending wise? I would travel more, or I would have job. It's not that I wanted to retire and didn't work. The $1 million was never, I don't want to work when I'm 40. It was, I wanted to choose what I did. Mm-hmm. And so the goal stayed, but it evolved, and I was able to adapt to that. So now I have financial freedom, so I'm not necessarily limited to where I work. I work where I love what I do. I'm very passionate about what I'm doing, and I feel like the purpose is very purpose-driven. Mm-hmm. But I have all the freedom of time that I need. I have a lot of flexibility in my schedule. And so it was a big goal. I didn't think I could achieve it. I came close to it, and then I realized it wasn't the right goal, and it's still there, and everything I wanted from that goal is there, but it just changed the way that I set it.
Gotcha. When you are coaching business owners, how does setting goals for the entrepreneurs help them inspire their team? How do they take those goals and use them to get everybody on board?
So like I said, if you're a leader, if you're an entrepreneur, you're running a business, you've got to have a vision. Mm-hmm. So right there out of the gate, your staff will not follow you, they will not stay, and they will not be happy if they're not being taken somewhere with you on a journey. If you never sat down to come up with your journey, they're just hating their job. Now, maybe you're a nice guy, maybe they like their job or they make good money, but really people want purpose. Mm. And you give them that purpose by creating a direction and a destination. From there, there's a lot of ways that affects the team. Number one, you don't have to set the mini goals. So I have this idea, actually it's not mine, it is from Vishen Lakhiani's Code of the Extraordinary Mind. Mm-hmm. He talks about ends goals and means goals. Ends goals are more vision-based. They're a little bit less specific, although they do need specificity in them, but they're more about who you want to be. Mm. And a means goal is the habits or the tasks that get you there. The leader has the ends goal. They're creating this bigger picture of what this team can do that couldn't be done individually. The team needs to come up with the means goals. They can be inspired by the leader with suggestions, but really a good team says, you were hired because you know this better than I do. Mm-hmm. My job was not to come up with all the little mediocre tasks. My job is to tell you where I want to go and then have you guys collectively decide what you can bring to the table to get us to where we're going. So you're inspiring them to set their own smaller means goals. And you also occasionally, what I suggest, is meet with them and establish ends goals for themselves. So they have a personal purpose in their life that hopefully your business or the mission of the company is fulfilling. Mm-hmm. And if the person working does not have a purpose, happiness is one of the hardest things they'll ever find.
That is very true. You mentioned habits. Tell me what kind of routine or habits do you have to help you reach your goals on a regular basis?
what habits do I have, as opposed to saying that establishing or reaching a goal is based on the habits that you create that get you there. I have a habit of reading books that are based in whatever it is I'm trying to grow in. So when I was reaching for my $1 million goal while running restaurants, I constantly was reading new books to understand what was possible with my money, to help establish and really understand how I was going to get there. When you set the goal, you don't always have a how. So a lot of times the habit has to either learn the how or be the how. So if weight loss or being healthy or being fit or something like that, then the habit needs to be how you're eating or going to the gym. A lot of people see the gym as being the goal. I'm going to go to the gym 3 times a week. The gym becomes the habit that is established because of the goal, not so much the goal. The gym shouldn't be the goal, it should be the habit.
Right. So you've mentioned books. For somebody who is just starting on their leadership journey or an entrepreneurial journey, do you have a recommended book?
Oh man, I should have thought of this before I came. That's a tough one.
There's a lot of options.
There are, and I pride myself on the variety that I've read. I mentioned The Code of the Extraordinary Mind because the way that it lays things out, God, there's so many. There's so many. Specifically for goal setting, I don't really have one. I'm going to say that one, The Code of Extraordinary Mind. He talks about limiting beliefs a lot. He calls them the culturescape and the rules, societal rules, and how to break them to help get to your ends goals and your means goals. And he really breaks down the concept of how somebody could go to college for all these years and struggle in life, like is work is struggle to get to a certain point where they thought that was what they wanted to be, and then they get there and they're not happy. And so he tries to get that alleviated by getting you to understand what happiness is going to be first, and then figure out where you want to be. So that's a good one.
Another one that I have read along those lines is The Magic of Thinking Big. I believe that's Brian Tracy. And then, goal setting is Brian Tracy. I can't remember Magic of Thinking Big off the top of my head. I'll have to look it up. But those two back to back are very good about breaking the limiting mindsets. So I listened to John Maxwell speak, and he was talking about being in a room full of successful people, and his favorite thing to do when he is in a room full of successful people is to ask each one of them what the best piece of advice they've ever been given was. So what is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Been given was, it's not about you. And that hits deeper the more you go into it. But absolutely, and this comes a lot into goal setting. I set goals for always in my life, and they start off with being very ego-driven. You want to achieve something for you, you want to achieve money for you, but the deeper you understand the 7 levels of why, or just the depth of your goals, when you start tying your goal to a why that's not you, it's way more powerful. So if you have kids, it becomes your family, just the freedom of life. Or when I ran my business, it was the team that I was growing the business for. When I went from 2 stores to 3, the one main thing on my mind was, how do I pay my managers more? There just wasn't enough income from the 2 stores. They were working hard and I didn't have the money to pay them. If I opened a 3rd store and it did this much in volume, I could pay everyone this much. It wasn't about me. And really understanding that concept can make people and their goals very powerful.
Gotcha. Do you have a different piece of advice that you often give?
I do, because in that goal setting, as you achieve, the thing that you realize is goals are not happiness, and happiness is not from goals. So there are people out there that I've seen, because I've coached quite a few people, they say a goal that they don't reach for, and then they say, hypothetically, if I reached this, I would be happy. But I don't need to be happy so bad that I'm going to work to achieve it. You have this other group of people that say, if I reach this goal, I'll be happy, so they do it. Whatever it is, climb the mountain, lose the weight, make the money, and they do it, and they do it again, and they do it again, and they do it again. And eventually you get to this point where you say, none of that has made me happy. Those are the people that start looking for happiness within. They realize that just getting something is not enough. And there's a lot of people that aren't happy that say that they could be if they just. Happiness is a choice that you make. And you can be happy today, right now, at this moment, or not. And sometimes having a goal and a vision, knowing where you're going, helps with happiness, but it's still a choice, whether you reach the goal or not.
Gotcha. It's very true. It is a choice. Is there anything that you would like to share with the listeners that you are doing, something that you would like to promote, your coaching or consulting or anything along those lines?
Well, it's not about me. I do coaching and I work with businesses. Right now, I also work with a company that works primarily with restaurants because that is an incredibly broken area that needs help. The thing I'm working on the most, and depending on when this comes out and how people stay involved, I homeschool my 5 kids. My wife and I homeschool our 5 kids, and there's not enough information about personal finance. So remember, my goal was $1 million. I'm financially focused, and I think that financial freedom is for whatever personal individual reason they have, is a good thing to work towards as a goal. So I'm working on an entire homeschool curriculum of personal finance and modern investing. Wow. Modern is different than just mutual fund, 12%, but really helping understanding the tools we have and helping high school and college aged people understand what's possible and how to move financially.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Brett. Today's guest is someone who knows the power of asking the right questions and the impact they can have on the trajectory of our lives. As a successful business owner, leadership coach, and workshop presenter, he's spent years helping others navigate their fears, reimagine what's possible, and take steps towards their biggest goals. Outside of his professional life, he's a devoted husband and proud father of 5. Together with his wife, he homeschools their children, fostering creativity, curiosity, and a love of learning. Over the years, he's honed his skills in public speaking, storytelling, and inspiring others to embrace their own potential. Brett is here to challenge the way you think, inspire you to dream bigger, and show you how a simple shift in mindset can create a ripple effect in your life. Ladies and gentlemen, Brett Klooz.